As we enter into October of 2024, the final month before the election in November, today I'll be updating my 2024 electoral map prediction between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. We'll begin with the solid states. These are states that either Harris or Trump are going to win by 15 percentage points or more. Starting with the solid blue states, the vice president is easily going to win Washington, California, Hawaii, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine. This gives her 109 electoral votes. As for Trump, he is going to win Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except its 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina, Alaska, and the 2nd District of Maine. This will give him 126 electoral votes as he takes an early lead. Moving on now to the likely states, which will be decided by 7 to 15 points. These races will be more competitive, but one candidate will still maintain a clear edge. And starting off with the likely blue states, we have Oregon, Illinois, New Jersey, and Delaware. All 4 of these states went to Biden by solid margins in the last election, but Kamala Harris simply isn't performing as well as the incumbent president was 4 years ago. And then up in New York, she's doing abysmally bad. She leads by just 13 points in the Empire State, a state that Joe Biden won by 23 in the last election. In fact, she is on track to pull off the worst Democratic performance in New York since 1988, so it's going to be likely blue on our map. While in Colorado, she's going to win by around 7 to 10 points. So with the solid and likely states now filled in for Vice President Harris, she is just under 200 electoral votes. As for Trump, we have 2 pretty obvious likely states, Iowa and Ohio. These 2 states used to be hyper-competitive just a decade ago. They went to Obama by narrow margins. Then, in 2016, Trump won them by nearly double digits each, and Iowa shifted 15 points to the right in that election. And then in 2020, the polling said that Trump was going to win these states by 1 to 2 percentage points. But again, he won them by the exact same margin. They are no longer considered competitive. Iowa and Ohio are likely red states that Trump is going to win for a 3rd time. We also have Texas. The Lone Star State has historically been red. The last time a Democrat won, it was Jimmy Carter in 1976. In 2016, Trump won Texas by 9 points. He won by just under 6 in 2020. He obviously hasn't performed the greatest in the state over the last 8 years. In 2012, Mitt Romney became the last Republican to win Texas by a solid margin. Now, in 2024, considering Texas's general shift over to the left, it is unlikely that Trump is going to win the state by 15 points or more. But he's probably going to be able to crack at least 10. So, it's firmly going to fall into the likely red column, with Trump on track to win its 40 electoral votes. And finally, in Florida, this is no longer a battleground state. You're not going to find it on any list of swing states. It also isn't even polled as much. It isn't really getting the media attention that it has gotten in previous election cycles. In 2016, it was very close. People thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, but Trump squeaked out a narrow victory. 4 years later, people thought Joe Biden was going to be able to flip back Florida. In fact, most people were pretty confident on that. But instead of winning it, he actually lost Florida by an even larger margin than Clinton did 4 years prior. And then, 2 years after this, in 2022, Ron DeSantis was reelected as governor by a 20-point margin. Florida today is a red state. There's no doubt Trump's going to win it. It is going to be more competitive on the presidential level, but it is no longer in play. And so, with the solid and likely states filled in, Trump maintains his lead. He is now at 219 electoral votes, just 51 away from the presidency. So, we're left with 12 states in the 2nd District of Nebraska. It is going to be these states that are going to ultimately decide who the 47th president is going to be. They make up 128 electoral votes combined, less than a quarter of the Electoral College, but they really do have all the power in such a competitive election. Now, we're going to fill in the lean states, decided by 2 to 5 points. These races could realistically go one way or the other. However, one candidate still does have a slight advantage. And so we're going to start off with the lean Harris states. Many of these states were likely states for Joe Biden. She simply isn't doing as well as Biden was in 2020. Biden ran under very good circumstances 4 years ago. We had a pandemic, we had a recession, and he was also chosen by the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris only became the nominee because Joe Biden dropped out very early. If she had to run for the nomination in her own right, she probably would not have been able to win it. Her campaign failed miserably in 2020, and it's one of the big issues Democrats are facing this cycle. The fact that they simply do not have the strongest nominee that they could have had, which is what you typically get after a national primary. And so, in terms of lean states for Harris, we're going to start off in Minnesota. This is going to be pretty disappointing for the Harris camp if she wins it by just a lean margin. Joe Biden carried the state by 7 points in 2020. Now, Hillary Clinton did do pretty badly in 2016. She won it by just 1.5 points. Minnesota has not gone red since 1972, and if Joe Biden hadn't dropped out of the race, Republicans probably would have been able to flip the state entirely. However, with Harris now on the ticket, she is doing better than Biden was before he exited, but she only leads by 4.7% in the polling. In fact, the most recent poll has her ahead by just 3 points. This is pretty abysmal for a Democrat in a state that Democrats have not lost in 52 years. And so, Minnesota will go to Harris on our map, but this is definitely not as well as she would like to perform. Down in New Mexico, this is a race that's becoming increasingly competitive as Democrats are starting to lose their edge with Hispanic voters, who are shifting to the right. In the coming decades, Democrats are going to have a harder and harder time winning the state, but for now, Kamala Harris is probably going to be able to pull off a 5 to 7 point victory. Moving on up to the Northeast, we have 2 more lean states for the vice president. Starting off in New Hampshire, she isn't doing as badly as Hillary Clinton was in 2016 when she came very close to losing it entirely. Joe Biden won the Granite State by 7 points in 2020. Kamala Harris is probably going to be able to pull off a 4 to 6 point victory. She is definitely the favorite there, but she simply isn't on par with Biden's performance in the last election. And then, up in Maine, we have 2 additional electoral votes going to the vice president. She's probably going to win here as well. Joe Biden won it by nearly a double-digit margin in 2020. Finally, we have the 2nd District of Maine, where Democrats have a slight advantage. And so, with 8 states left, these are the 8 states that I consider to be toss-ups. We have the 7 traditional battlegrounds and then Virginia, which I also consider to be a swing state now, just because of how competitive it's become. If you look at the battlegrounds polling average on Real Clear Politics, we actually have Trump now in the lead. If you've been following elections for a long time, you know that Trump taking the lead is a pretty big deal because every single time he is massively underestimated. If the polls say Trump's going to win, there's really little doubt that he is going to win. And so, in terms of the lean states for Trump, we're going to start off down in Arizona, which has actually become the most right-leaning of the swing states. Trump leads by 2 percentage points in the polling average. The polling average says he's going to win by 2 points or more. This is a state that he lost in the last election. He lost to Biden by 0.3%. Yes, it was close, but Biden ultimately was the winner. Democrats are unlikely to repeat this success this time around. If you look at the polling, Trump has led basically every single poll released in the state over the last few weeks. There was only one very short period of time where Kamala Harris took the lead after she entered the race. Trump has been ahead ever since, and his lead is continuing to expand. So, Arizona is no doubt going to be lean red. Trump is the clear favorite. Moving out east to Georgia, we have the most competitive state from 2020, decided by less than a quarter of a percentage point. It did go to Joe Biden, but this time Georgia is on track to go to Donald Trump. In fact, polling in Georgia has been much more accurate than in many other swing states, especially those in the Midwest, which we're going to cover in just a few minutes. Looking at the polling today, we see very good signs for the former president. He leads in basically every single poll released. There was a short period of time, just like in Arizona, where Kamala Harris took the lead, but Trump has since regained the advantage. His lead is continuing to expand, and he's probably going to be able to win back Georgia, a state he won by 5% back in 2016. In North Carolina, we also have Trump leading in the polls here. He's ahead by 0.7%. We have a lot of polls going into this polling average, and Trump remains the favorite. If you look at the averages as they've moved over time, Kamala Harris has never taken the lead here. Trump has been ahead throughout the entirety of the election cycle, and this is a state that overestimated Democrats in the last election. Joe Biden was supposed to win North Carolina by all accounts, but instead, he lost it by just over 1 percentage point. In fact, North Carolina is the only swing state that went to Trump in both of the last 2 elections that he ran in. In 2016, he won it by 3.7%, and in 2020, he won it by 1.3%. Today, he's probably going to be able to win the state by 2 to 4 points. North Carolina is going to lean in favor of Donald Trump, giving him an additional 16 electoral votes. Now we have 5 states left. Trump is at 262 electoral votes. He only has to win 1 state out of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Nevada simply isn't going to be enough. And this is the problem for Kamala Harris. She has to win Virginia, which she probably is going to. She is the slight favorite there, but Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, all three of these states are going to be ultra competitive. These are states that Joe Biden did win back in 2020, but by very narrow margins. In 2016, Trump actually came out on top. Trump has probably been the most transformational Republican nominee in the Midwest in the last generation. In fact, these are three states where Trump won them in 2016. They hadn't gone red for nearly 3 decades. That is why these three states together are referred to as the Blue Wall, because they consistently voted for Democrats from the 1990s all the way until Trump broke the walls down in 2016. And so we have one more lean state left on this map. It is going to be the Keystone State of Pennsylvania. You can see here why it's going to be so important. This is the state that's probably going to get either one candidate over 270 electoral votes. It's probably going to be right in the middle, and Donald Trump right now is favored in the state. In fact, he leads in the polling average, which almost never happens. Polling here has consistently underestimated support for the former president. In 2020, Joe Biden was supposed to win the state by 5.7%. In the end, he won it by just 1.2%. In 2016, Hillary Clinton lost the state entirely, but at this point in 2016, she was supposed to win it by 2.4%. Today, Donald Trump has retaken the lead. In fact, looking at all the polls in the polling average, only 2 show Harris ahead. If you look at how the averages have changed over the last few months, it was very competitive between Biden and Trump in early 2024. And then, Trump took a big lead after that disastrous debate performance from Biden. Pennsylvania remains competitive, but considering how Trump is always underestimated and the fact that he has now retaken the lead in the polling average, the state is going to lean red, with Trump on track to win it by just over 2 points. Now, to finish the map with the tilt states, these are going to be the most competitive races in the country. They really could go either way, and it wouldn't surprise too many people. These are pure toss-ups. We're going to start off with the tilt Trump states, but he's already at 281, so he doesn't really need any more. However, these are going to be additional prizes that he can certainly pick up. We're going to start with Nevada. The silver state hasn't gone red since 2004. Harris is polling slightly better than she was a few weeks ago. Today, she leads by 1.3%. But this probably is not going to be enough. Joe Biden was supposed to win the state by 5 points in 2020. In the end, he carried it by 2.4%. In fact, Nevada is shifting to the right. They elected a Republican governor in 2022, and they also had a very close Senate race, with a Democratic incumbent eventually coming out on top by a narrow margin. But Nevada is now a pure toss-up. However, it only has 6 electoral votes, so it's really not that important. But it's going to be a symbolic flip in favor of Trump, a state he never won in either 2016 or 2020. And finally, we have Virginia, a state Biden won by double digits. It's becoming incredibly competitive. Kamala Harris is probably going to win it by less than 2%. They elected a Republican governor back in 2021. I will say Democrats are still favored here, but it is going to go down to the wire as well. And so currently, as we enter the month of October, the final month before the election, Donald Trump is at 312 electoral votes, according to my updated forecast, and Kamala Harris is at 226.